Your income, your independence, and your impact are limited because your billboard is not big enough. Had a good friend agent that said, I'm losing out on agents coming to my brokerage, on deals coming into my business because I don't have a big enough billboard. Today, I'm going to teach you how to be a podcast guest and how to increase the size of your billboard. All right, welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. I was talking with a friend of mine just recently, and again, he had said, my billboard's not big enough. That really resonated with me when I was then talking to another agent. She said, Justin, I know you've invited me to be a guest on your podcast. I really feel like I have something to offer, but nobody that I know of has actually created a podcast on how to be a good podcast guest. So I'm now taking that upon me, number one, to convince you why you should be doing this, why you should be seeking out podcast opportunities, and number two, how to do it. I'm going to give you the 5 B's of being a great podcast guest. So first, the reason why. There is music still inside of you, whether you're at the beginning of your career or whether you're at the end of your career. The things that you know would be beneficial to other people. They'd be beneficial to your buyers and sellers. They'd be beneficial to your investors. And as a result, it'd be beneficial to your income. It would also be beneficial to other real estate agents. And as a result, fewer people are following you, whether they be support staff or whether it be people who are potentially going to join your team, join your brokerage. They are not in business with you simply because they don't know about you. I had that advice once. I said, Justin, your value offering is very different. The biggest challenge you have is not enough people know about you. And I'll say the same is true for everybody listening to this today. You have something to offer. There is something that you can offer to other people that would be a benefit to them, but your billboard is too small. So let's get into this conversation about how do you become a successful podcast guest. Okay, I'm going to give you the 5 B's. Let me tell you one more story. Again, very successful agent had mentioned, Justin, I know you've asked me to be on your podcast. I'm kind of nervous about that because I don't know exactly what it is that I should be talking about, how to do it. So again, that's what inspired this for those of you that are just tuning in. So B number 1, right? I'm gonna give you the 5 B's of being a great podcast guest. Number 1 is you're going to need to be proactive. You have a lot to share. You have a lot to offer, but oftentimes people don't know that. Okay, so the very first thing is that people are probably not going to come knocking on your door to have you on their podcast. Unless you're already famous, the reality is they're not going to come looking for you. You're going to have to be proactive. Okay, now that shouldn't scare you. As a podcast host, and I've been one for over 4 years now, I'm always looking for good podcast guests. A lot of the people that come to me are looking to sell something. Nothing wrong with that at all, right? We all sell something to some degree. But I always love those that I come across that are just simply the best in class at what they do. They're the best in class at one very specific thing. So I would encourage you to think about the fact that you need to be proactive. You need to seek out what podcasts you'd like to be on, right? You might not start off with a Joe Rogan show, right? You might start off with mine. You might start off with smaller, successful, long-standing podcasts. You can actually go in to your iTunes, search, let's say, real estate, and go look at the podcast, see how long they've been going. Get a feel if you like the host. Do you like the interview questions that they ask? Do you like the overall energy? Do you like the mission and passion of the show? If it is, then hey, that might be a good fit. I'll tell you, I welcome when I have somebody who has a specific thing that they're really good at, and I can say my audience needs that right now, or my clients need that right now, I'm all on board. So part of this being proactive, again, which is point number 1 of being a great podcast guest, is to not get your feelings hurt if they don't respond. Right? I've had conversations with Tom Ferry, Grant Cardone, many others. Some have come on my show. Some have said, look, I love what you're doing, but I just can't do it at this point. Okay, so don't get your feelings hurt. Don't get your dauber down if people said no. It might not just be a right fit right now. Stay in contact with them. Add value to them. They might be asking, well, how do I do that? How do I be proactive? it's amazing how you can get access to the biggest stars in the world through Instagram, through Twitter. Like, don't discount the fact that many of these people manage their own accounts, and it is a direct hall pass to them. Now, these next 5 steps I'm going to give you are going to give you tips on how to approach them. Okay. But just know that, again, you might not start with the biggest stars. You might start with people who just have a podcast and you like their energy. Okay. Start there, get comfortable, and then move up over time. That's point number 1, is to be proactive. Point number 2 is to be clear. Okay. So don't go and just say, like, I'm going to share some knowledge, or approach somebody saying, hey, I've got some good things to offer. It's not going to work very well. You need to actually have a very specific deliverable. One of the things that I help my clients do is to get very clear on what I call their RQER, their remarkable, quantifiable end result. Now, if you want some additional help on that, reach out to me through one of these major platforms, and maybe we can schedule some time for me to help you with this. But it gives massive clarity as to who you serve specifically, how you serve them, right? Like what you help those people to get, without having to do what? Without having to do something that most people don't like to do, by doing what your unique formula. Okay. So for example, today I helped an agent through this, very successful agent. He's lacking a little bit of clarity on what it takes, like on who he really serves. So we identified the fact that, let me see if I can even pull it up here. I don't know if I have it in front of me, but we came down to the fact that his RQER, here it is I help confident yet inconsistent real estate agents get monthly closings without having to use lead gen strategies they don't like, by discovering their unique talents and gifts. Okay, so I helped him through that, those 4 steps. I help blank get blank without having to blank by blank. Okay. So going through that exercise, you can go through it on your own. You can easily draft that up and work through that, or you can reach out to me and I can help you. Okay. But those 4 steps will give you clarity on what is it that makes me unique. That formula is called the quantifiable end result. I call it the remarkable quantifiable end result, because if you just say, I help buyers and sellers get a home without stress by showing them homes, like, that is not unique, and no podcast host is going to want you on. You have to be clear on something unique and remarkable that you bring to the marketplace that nobody else does. Okay. So that is specifically how you get clear. Have a deliverable, have something that you can actually offer, right? Not necessarily a product, but have some end product, some end result that you help agents or clients get to. By having that, you will be very beneficial and valuable to a podcast host. Again, those of you that are listening to my podcast right now, I'm not charging you for this. I'm donating my time. One, it's because that's who I am. That's who I want to be, right? As a big thinker, somebody that not only creates and produces big, but somebody that gives back and impacts big. So know that other podcast hosts do that for that reason, and because they want to increase the size of their own billboard, right? Because they do have something valuable to offer, but people need to know about them. So it only helps us as podcast hosts to know specifically what it is that you bring with a lot of clarity to the marketplace, to see if there's a match, to see if what my audience needs at that moment matches with who you are and the value that you bring to the marketplace. Okay, so be clear. That's point number 2. That's the second B, is be clear. The third one is be engaging. Okay, the way to be engaging, number 1, is that people relate to stories. Stories are the best way to capture an audience's attention. I started off this podcast with some stories. Okay, getting really good at telling stories is an important thing. Be fun, be engaging, right? These are all part of being engaging, right? Is to actually be a storyteller, be fun, be funny, be entertaining. Now, if you don't feel like you are those things, don't overthink it. Be who you are, but be the most engaging version of you. Okay, that's point number 3, is come in not just with telling facts and points and tips and tactics, but tell a story. So for example, let's say you had a strategy that you thought was really unique to help get buyers their home in a tight inventory market, let's say. Don't just say, here's what I do to help buyers get offers accepted in this tight market. I would be more specific and say, now let me tell you a story. Now you might change the names for anonymity's sake, but you could say, for example, this is how I help people, right? And you would fill in the gaps of exactly what you do to help people to get those offers accepted. Now let me tell you a story. In fact, you might even start off with the story. Let me tell you a story about John and Amanda. And they were struggling, right? They had submitted offers with another agent, 5 other offers, and they were just getting burnout. Their spirits were being dampened that maybe they weren't going to be able to buy. And I implemented my system, and here's the end result, right? You can kind of walk them through a story. The more kind of emotion, the more humanity that you put into that, the more people will connect with that experience. So again, be engaging. Now, this next B number 4 is be succinct. And I put this after story because I want you to be engaging, but sometimes you can be too engaging and you can ramble. I've had guests where I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking like, how do I cut this person off? Like it would be so rude because they just keep going. And I'd actually rather have someone that rambles a little bit than someone that's like answers like dead end questions, like yes, no, like those are hard interviews. So don't be that. Okay. But it's important to be succinct, like have practice a little bit before, right? Practice with a coworker, with a family, with a friend, have them ask you questions. Okay. And there's something that a podcast host likes more than someone to say, here's some good questions to ask me. It gives us a format to work from to know that the conversation is going to flow and it's an area in which you're comfortable. So part of this being succinct is being prepared, right? Think through a little bit, like what would be a really good question for someone to ask me? Give that to the podcast host, right? Doesn't mean that I'm always going to stay exactly on that. But I will tell you, it is helpful to at least know what areas to go down and what areas you haven't really thought through. Okay. And the last and final point of being a great podcast guest is to be curious and respectful. Okay. And I put those two together for a reason, because not only do you want to just have great information to deliver, but a great podcast involves when you're being interviewed is to be curious about the other person, to have an engaging conversation where you're having some new ahas and you're listening, right? And you're not necessarily turning the table and interviewing them, right? That's always a little bit awkward, but it's more about being very curious about kind of what their goals are and being respectful about the fact that they have this podcast for a reason to deliver value to their audience, and being respectful of that. Giving kudos back to the podcast host, right? Edifying them in return, telling them that I love this show. I listen to it only if you actually do, but be respectful of their goals with this podcast, and be sure and include that in part of your presence in being a great podcast guest. You guys want to wrap up again, these 5 steps. I'm going to summarize them again. Number 1, be proactive. Number 2, be clear. Number 3, be engaging. Number 4, be succinct. And lastly, be curious and respectful. If you include those 5 things in your pursuit of building a bigger billboard and proactively reaching out to podcast hosts, I promise you're going to start to get more exposure, and a couple things are going to happen. Number 1, your income is going to grow. You're going to have more agents that want to work with you. Number 1, you're going to have more clients that want to work with you. You're going to have more and better retention of talent because the people that work with you respect you because you're well known, because you've actually thought through what makes you different. You've thought through what makes your value proposition clear and different from other people. Your income is going to go up. Okay. Number 2, your independence is going to go up as you attract more business, as you attract more and better people to work with you. It's less of a grind. It's less of this experience where you're having to work so hard to go get customers. They start to come to you because you're well known. Okay. And you can even put things on your website, guest on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show, right? That might not seem like a big thing, but clients, teammates, other agents, they look at this and they see you as an expert as opposed to just another agent. And the last thing that's going to happen is the third I, which is impact. That all this music that you have in you is not going to die with you, right? When you retire out of the business, when you decide that I'm not going to do this anymore, people aren't going to have to start from scratch and rebuild entirely. They're going to be able to stand on your shoulders, and the gratification that you bring into an industry is going to be phenomenal. It's not only going to fill your own soul, but it's also going to have the opportunity to like help other people, right? So again, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I appreciate you listening. And my requests, right, of everybody here today is not just to go think bigger, but it's to go be proactive at building your own billboard. Give yourself some help by leveraging modern media and take the knowledge that you have and bless the lives of other people and watch how it comes back to you. I appreciate you tuning in and listening. This has been helpful. Please give us a review. And my final request of everybody here today is to go think bigger. Happy holidays to everybody. We'll talk soon.